became very popular. There's an article in the Ford website, which I brought a little excerpt from it on page 4. It speaks about how Acheinu became like a very much more popularized after October 7th, although it's always been sung in our tough times. It appears in our prayer books. It speaks here about that piece. That article also speaks about the origin of the melody. It's from A.B. Rottenberg. He wrote it some 35 years ago. He doesn't even remember what prompted him to sit down at the piano that day. He didn't write the words. The words go back. Already, if you look on the bottom of the page 4, which we'll go through together, these words go back pretty far, all the way to the 9th century, in different versions of it. Okay, so we'll go over that together, the differences. But he said something must have been going on. He said whether it was something going on in Israel, in my community, or somebody who was sick or in danger. I remember being in a vulnerable state of mind. And he says he lives in Toronto. He took a passage from liturgy that fit his mood and set it to music in about an hour. It became the second track on his album, etc. He says he has mixed feelings about the song's wartime resonance. I'm pleased that I wrote a song that gives people comfort. At the same time, it's sad that we are going through a period where there are hostages and people suffering and soldiers putting their lives on the line. I hope for better days when some other song I've written with a happier theme could be sung. Okay. So the melody is well known in all denominations, and it offers a lot of strength and comfort, and is like is a placeholder for our hopes that Hashem should free those who are in captivity. So let's think about the song itself. I brought here a few questions that we could think about in relation to the prayer. The prayer appears, it's recited every day. It's recited after during Kriyat Torah. We take out the Torah, and it's recited. And we in Shul recite it every day now. After we do Psalm 121, Psalm 130, we recite Acheinu every day since the beginning of the war, since after the beginning of the war. So here's the text for our brothers. As for our brothers, the whole house of Israel who are in distress or captivity, it's on page 3. May the all present have compassion on them and lead them from distress to relief, from darkness to light, from subjugation to redemption, now, swiftly, and soon. And let us say, Amen. Okay, so let's go through some of these questions I have, and then we'll try to address them based on the history of the song and based on my interpretation of the song. And feel free to also think through your own interpretation, some of your own answers to these questions or any other questions you may have, okay? Here's some questions. When we first started singing this in a more intense way, more regularly in our shul, I started to think, what am I saying? What am I saying? And so here, let me down a large rabbit hole in terms of research and trying to figure out. It's hard to find actually discussions on what we're actually saying. So here I'm going to offer you a way to understand it. So as for our brothers, it says, Acheinu kol Beit Yisrael. Okay, look on the screen, I'm highlighting it. Acheinu kol Beit Yisrael. So the question is, why are we speaking as for our brothers, the whole house of Israel? Okay, Hanitunim b'tzar v'shivya, who are in distress or captivity. Is all of Israel in captivity?
Captivity, but certainly under stress.
Yeah, so in distress or captivity on sea or land. So we're speaking about, that's the first question. We're going to think about, why are we speaking about all of Israel? You're offering an answer. You're saying it relates to all of us. We're in distress over it. Let's think about that. It speaks about distress and captivity. So we're going to think about what the difference is between distress and captivity. In Hebrew is Sarah and Shivya. Shivya means liot shavui, means to be captured. Alev shali shavui ba'aza. Sandy's wearing that the necklace which says my heart is captured in Gaza. So shavui means to be captured. So we have Tsar and Shivya. And then we also want to think about why does it say the language omdim, bein bayam, bein bayabasha. This is going to be a little technical for let's say 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to ask some technical questions. Okay, so yeah, this is the more technical piece of the lecture. This is kind of, you can bear with me for this, and then we'll get to some answers in like some meaningful takeaways. We have ha'omdim, who stand. Bein bayam ubein bayabasha. Language is weird. It should just say ha'omdim, those who are bayam ubayabasha, those who are in the sea or on the land. What is it? Ha'omdim, those who are standing. Bein, between this and between that. Just say those in the sea or on the land. Speaking of those who I think are in distress or captured in the sea or the land. Yeah.
Maybe it's a reflection back on Yetziat Mitzrayim.
Okay. That's a great answer. That was what I was going to answer. Nice.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Michael said perhaps the language here, and this is hinting to Egypt, when Israel stood between the sea and the land. Right. This Rabbi Poser mentioned this, and I gave this in a class. So I'm going to give him the credit, and also Michael also mentioned the two rabbis. But
It also, I get sense of like, you're neither in either place. You're in this in-between thing and you need to take a greater stand.
oh wow, okay. Sandy said it speaks to like a liminal state. I just like to use that word. It sounds fancy, but it speaks to like an in-between state where you're neither you're not involved and you need to step in and make things better.
It's more militant.
I love that. It could also point to just like the state of people who are in captivity, that they're like in no man's land in a way. They're nowhere really. It's a tough situation to be in. So those are three things we think about. The direction I was going to take it, which I'm already foreshadowing, is I think it's hinting to Egypt. It's hinting to our situation in Egypt and what that was like to be standing at the sea with nowhere to go. We have our enemies behind us. We have a wall in front of us, the sea in front of us. Only place we can turn is to Hashem and ask for help. So I think also it could be speaking about hinting to Egypt, because it's trying to give us hope that they did get out of Egypt, that they did break through the sea. So that could be another piece why Egypt is hinted to here. There's another place in the song which hints to Egypt as well. Anybody want to take a look through the song and see if they find some sort of language here that reminds them of the Haggadah? Hint, we didn't read it yet. Yeah, Shiabud Legeula, right? That language of being in bondage and then being redeemed also seems to hint to Egypt. It's very interesting. We're going to get to this, but the earlier texts, I don't have this. This is an addition. So maybe whoever added it wanted to bring in Egypt into the discussion. Also, the Omdim Bain Bayamu Bain standing between, that's also a later addition. So perhaps somebody transposed Egypt into this song so we could be thinking about that. I'll offer some thoughts on that going forward. Yeah.
Well, the word ma'afelah, so we had one of the plagues was darkness.
Correct.
And
That's good
a
too.
direct hint.
Yes.
And then the sun comes out.
Yeah. You're right.
It's a direct,
You're right. That's good as well. The original version had Afela in it. So darkness. Yeah. Awesome. So the next question we want to ask is, why are we referring to God as Hamakom? Hamakom Yirachem. Again, we refer to Hashem as Makom in certain places. I know Sandy has some Torah on Hamakom, which but she's not looking at me. She doesn't want me to call her. Okay, no, I'm just joking. But Hamakom is God as the place. Why are we speaking about God as the place here? It's just say HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you look at earlier texts, if you look at bottom of page 4, the second row, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yirachem. Bottom, you see the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth column on the second row, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yirachem. So why are we speaking of God? It's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's Hamakom. Okay? And lastly, one other thing is, this is like a central thing I want to lean into, is that it seems to be that it's not parallel. If you take a look above, I didn't word this that well because I've got to check it. So it's not worded as well as I would have liked, but basically it says here we have Sarah, in the first part here, we have Sarah Ushivya, right? Sarah Uvashivya. Here we have Sarah, Lirvacha. So God will take you out of the constraints of the oppression to what I put here, to relief. Okay, that parallels. Sarah, we're going to get out of Sarah. Then we have Shivya, we should get out of Shivya, right? but then it brings a few other things. It says Afela leora shiabu legula. So it's not really parallel. We have we're in captivity. It should have just said from captivity to freedom, but it doesn't say this. It's from darkness to light, and it says from subjugation to redemption. So it's not fully parallel. Very interesting to point out. If you take a look below, the original versions were more parallel. In the 9th century and the 11th to 12th century, they didn't have Shiabud the Gula. If you look at all the columns here, all the rows in the 5th column, where it says Hamakom, none of them have Shiabud the Gula. So originally it was parallel, actually. Okay, are people following what I'm saying? Or is it going up beyond? Right. All right. I said I was going to use 4 minutes for the technical part, but I'm going to redeem you from that in just a moment. Okay. One more thing. We're going to go over this will be clear to you when you go over the answers. Okay. The last question is, why does it say now, swiftly and soon? It's a lot of, just say swiftly and soon, or just say soon, bekarobi. I mean, hashta bagala, bizman karib, there's a lot of statements. So one of them was added on later on. Now was added on later on. If you take a look at the 4th row here, the last column on page 4, the fourth row, the final column, hashata was added on later on. So basically, these are all questions we're going to think about. I'm going to offer you a way to navigate the song based on these questions and what to think about when we're singing it. And then I'll open it up to hear if others have some commentary. So here's a way to read the song, keeping all this in mind. Okay, the song is supposed to basically it begins with Acheinu. Acheinu kol Beit Yisrael. Okay, this language of Acheinu, if you look on, we won't go there now. I brought some precedents for some of this language in our tradition on page 5. You can look at that on your own, and maybe we'll look at that later. But Acheinu kol Beit Yisrael basically says our brothers, all of Israel. It's basically trying to say we have to look we have to take this on as a personal thing. That's the point of the song. It's supposed to say this is our family, and if they're in trouble, they're in captivity. All of Israel is in captivity. All of Israel is struggling. All of Israel is in distress. That's why it begins. Sorry, first answer. Acheinu kol Beit Yisrael. Ellen hinted to that. It's all of our problems, and so the song really is supposed to get us into that mode, to thinking that way, and it does that through examples. Okay, so it goes on to say, I'm understanding tsara oppression as physical oppression, some type of physical stress, suffering, and so really it's tough to think about. But if we put ourselves, I don't know, anybody ever been to Hostages Square in Israel? Anybody make a trip to Israel post October 7th and visit Hostages Square in Tel Aviv? Yeah, Sherry, anybody else? So if you go to Hostages Square, it was just basically like a museum, like open area around the museum. And after October 7th, families of hostages started to encamp there and protest there, and just like different people contributed art there and all kinds of like exhibits connected to the hostages, and it became known as Hostages Square. If you end up going there, hopefully it won't be a thing or just a relic of the past. But when you walk in, there's a ticker with the amount of days and seconds and minutes that people have been held hostage. And I was there last February, and it's still, sadly, still ticking. In Hostages Square, there's a tunnel. They have like a makeshift tunnel of what it might feel like to walk through a small stretch of a tunnel. Okay, I think this song is trying to do that for us emotionally. We're supposed to think about tsara. What kind of physical distress, pain, hunger, thirst, sadness, all kinds of physical oppression and pain somebody being held hostage might be going through. Then it's telling us, yeah.
What occurred to me was that since this was written many centuries ago, we've been through all kinds of horrible things happening. And it seems to me the language has expanded and become more ambiguous to cover all kinds of situations. And it's not being so specific anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. Correct. What I'm trying to do is to actually do the opposite in the sense that because there's so many of them, try to bring it down and help us have intentions, what we can think about. But indeed, it's open, right? So the next one is uveshivia, being held in captivity. And we're going to see there's two aspects of captivity. One is that it could be an internal captivity when you're in captivity, and one is that you're physically bound, like you can't escape, you don't have freedom. And the internal captivity, it's going to say later on that God's going to take us out of darkness. And somebody, if you think about, you've seen the videos, pictures of people who come out of Gaza, it's crazy to see. They're emaciated, they're not well, but there's so much emotional damage there, so much psychological problems, and it's just a deep pit of sadness and fear and anxiety that they're gonna have to deal with now. I think that's what it's talking about with the Aphela, the darkness. It could be speaking about an internal darkness. And then it goes on later on to speak about Mishiabu the Gula. I think that's the other component of Shivya, which is basically not being able to move, not being able to go anywhere, being held in captivity, not being able to have the freedom, mobility, and sometimes, many cases, being held in a dark space where you literally can't move. So, yeah.
In this case, what you're just saying, this call base Yisrael really fits in because the entire nation is in that dark space, not in the same way as the
Yes.
captives, but just in an emotional sense.
Yeah.
And that you see if you go.
Yeah.
You
And when
can see it
second
very
you
clear.
step off the plane in Israel, it's not, if anybody's been there since October 7th, it's not the way that it used to be. You step off the plane and the whole like path is lined with pictures of hostages. That's the first scene you see when you get into Israel. And that's just the reality. That's the reality of Israel. That's our reality now as Acheinu Kol Beit Yisrael. We're all one big family. So this is how I want to read this, okay? It says, we talk about Sarah and Shivya, and then it explicates what they are. Sarah Lervacha, we want to get out of that Sarah, the physical oppression, to a more expansive place. From darkness, which is a form of Shivya, an internal darkness, and then Shiabud, which is a form of Shivya. So really it is parallel the way I'm reading it, because Tzara relates to Tzara, and then Shivya splits into two, which is Afela and Shiabud, which is the inner darkness and the external bondage. So why do we talk about how God is Hamakom here? When do we speak about God as Hamakom? You know this. At Shiva house. You speak about God as Hamakom in the Shiva house. And the sages say, when you speak about God, Hamakom, so God's speaking that God's in us in our toughest places. God's everywhere. And so we're praying, just as God is able to make space and to be with us in our toughest times, we want to open up space in our hearts to really feel the pain and the struggle of our family members in Israel who are being held hostage. So we want to really supposed to like really enter into our hearts, and we're supposed to really feel it in a deep way. And that's why we have so many statements here. Now, soon, swiftly, because once you feel all that, we want to get out of it right now. We want to be removed from it right now. And the final piece is, we ask, why does it say Bein Bayam or Bein Bayabasha, Omdim? That's bringing Egypt into the story. And those are for the reasons you mentioned. Perhaps it can offer hope to know that we got out of Egypt despite everything that we were in, and hope that God can help us as well in this situation. And maybe it's also giving us a little bit more imagery to think about, some of the struggles in Egypt and how that can relate to the situation here. So there's a lot of questions in relation to it, but I try to offer the song as a kind of trying to enter us almost into the tunnel, into the inner world, into the suffering of our brothers. We speak about God as the place, to know that God's everywhere, and we have to make ourselves kind of like that. And through that, we're supposed to feel the pain and the agony of our brothers and sisters, and really pray from the bottom of our hearts when we sing this song. One more thing I just want to show you on the bottom of the page, just a little bit of the evolution of the song. This is the bottom of page war. The song, the first account of it we have is from the 9th century. And there, the language is kind of similar. Acheinu Yisrael, Banusei Yisrael, which is, how do you translate that? Anusim. How do you translate that?
Which one?
Anusim.
Um,
There's the converso,
yeah.
the conversos, those are, or forced to, the forced conversions, yeah. So, and that was actually, it was supposed to be said on Rosh Chodesh or Shabbat Mevarchin. It's not so clear. 9th century. It has Netunim B'Shivya over Tzara, a little bit of different order. And then I'm going through it here on the screen if you like want to know where I am. And this is Hamakom Baruchu Yirachem Otam. God will have mercy on them. V'Yoshem Bavur Shmo Gadol. In honor of God's big, great name. V'Yotzem Yitzara Levacho Me'afela Le'ora. It doesn't have Shiabud Legeula. Okay, so that was added on later on. And it doesn't have Bein Bayam or Bein Bayabasha at all. It doesn't have that at all. That was added later on in the 11th and 12th century. And there it doesn't say Bein Bayam or Bein Bayasha. It just says they're standing in the sea or the land. It seems to be like talking about different types of people who are in oppression and in captivity. So you just see some additions here. We have Hashem. So this is our version. Has Kol Beit Yisrael doesn't appear in the earlier versions either, just as Acheinu Yisrael. So all these are just like some additions we kind of addressed. So it's interesting. I don't know what happened between the 11th and 12th century to what we got to today. That's what we had.